I've got 3 players for you. Kylian Mbappé, Erling Haaland, Lionel Messi. All 3 of those players beginning their World Cup journeys as France open up their group against Senegal, Norway open up their group against Iraq, Argentina open up their group against Algeria, and our last game of Day 6 of the World Cup is Austria against Jordan. Got a lot to get to in this one, so let's get after it. Welcome into Day 6 World Cup preview. I am, of course, your host, Nick Burt, taking you through every single World Cup match on this journey to the final on July 19th at the New York, New Jersey Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. 2 more groups enter the World Cup stage today, as it is Groups I and Groups J. In Group I, France and Senegal will kick things off before leaving the floor to Iraq versus Norway. Later on in the day, Group J gets underway with Argentina taking on Algeria, and to close out our day, it's going to be Austria against Jordan. We got a lot to get into, so let's just get straight into Group I action, which kicks off 3 p.m. tomorrow from the New York, New Jersey Stadium, and it is one of the tournament favorites, France, taking on Senegal. Now, this is going to be an interesting matchup. Obviously, a lot of people have been waiting to see this French team come out on the international stage. One of the most stacked teams we've seen. But with the way the World Cup has been playing out so far, the French shouldn't be overlooking this Senegal team, as there is a lot to like about both of these sides. This World Cup has seemed to be a struggle for European-based sides, at least to start. Yes, you do have your, Sweden's pulling off 5-1 wins against Tunisia's, but then you also see Spain drawing 0-0 with Cabo Verde. It's been not the greatest of starts for European sides, and that's what I think throws a little bit of hesitation into the French sails here. My biggest worry here, I think, truly, is this is a very, very good French team. And this is a very good Senegal team, but everybody are going to overlook Senegal because, the flashy lights of your Mbappés of the world will be taking over. And I find that very interesting because France are always going to be there near the end of the tournament. At least that's what it feels like right now. Obviously, they won it in 2018, lost the final in 22. I don't want to say they haven't really been tested in those runs, because they have. They 100% have, in especially the lead up to the finals. But it also just kind of feels like they, kind of gotten a little bit of a easier path. Like, I think back to 22. They played Morocco in the semifinal. Yes, they played England in the quarterfinal. But they always seem to get that lucky break. Am I saying Senegal are going to be, another lucky break here? That's exactly the opposite of what I'm saying, actually. I feel like Senegal are going to be a true test for this French team that, honestly, I'm not sure how it's going to work out for them. I look at France coming into this game. They've won 4 out of 5. Their one loss is to Côte d'Ivoire, which, of course, is a African side. You take a look at Senegal's lead up to the World Cup. They've won 2, lost 2, drawn 1. Their 2 most recent results in the lead up to this World Cup were a 3-2 loss to the United States, where they looked quite decent, and a 0-0 draw against Saudi Arabia, who we saw get a 1-1 draw against Uruguay yesterday. for me, I'm worried about this French side just because of the struggles of the other European sides so far at this World Cup. And maybe the weather conditions are taking a bit more hold than people expected. I'm still predicting the French to win this. They have the better squad, hands down. But there are a lot of players on the Senegal team you should not be avoiding. I think, of course, Popsar, and obviously I think of him because he plays for Tottenham, and that's a big thing for me. But Sadio Mané is still there. Nicolas Jackson's still there. Ismail Assar on the right wing could be quite a danger. The Senegal team isn't going to be a pushover. They won the AFCON for a reason. I put it in air quotes because as of now, the history books don't say that because they lost a court case. They won the AFCON on the field. They had a phenomenal tournament. And I don't think they should be overlooked here. I mean, I think back to 2002. I was 1 year old, and it was Senegal's first time at the tournament. They opened up the tournament against the reigning champions, which were the French. Senegal got a 2-1 victory there. Could we see something similar today? I mean, anything seems to be possible at this World Cup. I'm not ruling it out. I just think the French have the better team here, and I'm taking the France to win this one. Overall, though, both these sides are very good, and there's a reason this is the group of death because, honestly, any of these teams could probably win this group. And this group is truly one of the better groups of this World Cup. And, there was a lot of talk about, with the expansion of the World Cup, 48 teams, you don't really have a group of death. And this is the closest you're going to get to a group of death. I love this group. I truly do love this group because it does feel like, and, I hate to be taking away from Iraq here because I think they're good, but they're just not on the level to win it. Feels like anybody else can win this group. I could see a path for Norway. I could see a path for Senegal. I could see a path, obviously, for the French. And who knows? Maybe there is a path for Iraq that I just am completely missing, which very real possibility. You never know. This group is so amazing. This is one I've been looking forward to just because I want to see how this tactically plays out, especially now given European struggles to begin this tournament. This is a group with 2 European sides in it and 2 non-pushovers as the other 2. How is that going to play out? That's going to be very interesting to see that develop. I mentioned another game in this group. We'll move on to that next. Our 6 p.m. game tomorrow. It is going to be live from the Boston Stadium. And as mentioned, it is the other game in Group I, and that is Iraq taking on Norway. Big match, big names. Norway, a dark horse for a lot of people in this tournament. How will that play out? That's going to be quite interesting. Iraq team very much being overlooked. Everybody's saying they're dead in the water in the group. I think there's still a case to be made for them. And I say a case to be made because I honestly, even though I mentioned I think they are the worst team in this group, and they are, but they still have a very good team. I look at Ali Al-Ahmed, the striker. He'll be starting most likely in that position tomorrow. He had a decent season this year I believe he was at Luton Town on loan. I look at somebody like Ahmad Bazil Fahali, who will probably be the goalkeeper. I know he plays, I believe, in Iraq, if I'm not mistaken. I would have to confirm on that. But this team, I feel like they're more being overlooked because nobody knows what to expect from them. And that's completely understandable. Truly, I don't know if I expect much from them because I don't know much about them. But that's what this World Cup's about. It's about learning about other teams, seeing how they play, maybe discovering a player that you're like, wow, this is actually a really good player. Why is he not playing in, a bigger league? And then you go up against Norway, a team at the World Cup for the first time since 1998. Of course, for Iraq, they haven't been to the World Cup since 1986. Both droughts being broken tomorrow in Boston. You, of course, have the big name. Of course, Erling Haaland. The biggest name of big names. But I mentioned in the preview episode for this group, this team has a lot more below them, obviously, or below Haaland. They have a lot of good players. I think of Sander Berg. I think of Sorloth, Martin Ødegaard, who's going to be your captain. Ødegaard Nyland, who's going to be your goalkeeper tomorrow. Christoph Ager, who will be on the back line. This is a very good Norway team. The question is, I feel like even though they haven't been to a World Cup in almost 30 years, it feels like a lot of pressure is being put on them, like they are a World Cup regular. And with the way that European teams have played this World Cup, I feel like they may struggle here, at least getting out of the gate. And Iraq, I feel like they're probably going to sit back a bit in this game. But my oh my, if they go on the attack and somehow go up in this game, it's going to be a shock to a lot of people. I don't think it would be a shock just because I have been watching these games. The Europeans have been kind of struggling to adapt as we get into games here. But it's just, obviously, it's so tough when you have a world-class player like Erling Haaland on the field. Like, it does feel like, I always say one man cannot change a game. It does kind of feel like Erling Haaland can change a game. This one's tough. I'm still going to take Norway because that's the smart pick here. It probably ends in a draw, if we're completely honest. It probably ends in a 1-1 draw. But truly, it would not shock me if Iraq at least at some point go ahead in this game. And then a lot of questions have to be asked as the game progresses with Norway down. So with that, this group, like I said, I love this group. I think this is going to be the most interesting group watch, obviously, of this World Cup. Now, there are other few groups out there that are starting to, make waves. But it just, obviously, this has been hyped up as the group of death. It feels like this is a group of death. Everybody's looking towards that final game between France and Norway at the end of this group. But we have 2 group games to get through before we even get to that. And truly, it does truly feel like anything can happen in this group. We continue on here. We move on to Group J. 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow from Kansas City. I believe Kansas City is the last stadium to be hosting their first World Cup match this tournament. It is the current champions, Argentina, beginning their run, trying to do something that has not been done in 6 decades, which is go back-to-back. They face off against Algeria. Of course, biggest story here, Lionel Messi. Beginning his 6th World Cup. He becomes the first player ever to do that. This is a very, very good Argentina team, obviously. They are bringing back a lot of players from that run in 2022, but they are mixing in some new names. For Algeria, it feels like you just got to hold the line for as long as you can. And, if you can do that, maybe you can get a result out of it. But obviously, a lot of the talk here is going to be about the Argentinians. So with that being said, obviously, Argentina, one of the favorites of this tournament, especially given It's in the Americas. Argentina has won 2 of the 3 of their World Cups in the Americas, 1978 when they hosted, and 1986, of course, when Mexico hosted. So this would be no new frontier, basically, for the Argentinians if they go on to win this World Cup. I look back to 2022 and how their tournament started. This was discussed yesterday because their opponent to open up 2022 played yesterday, and that was Saudi Arabia. They opened up that group. It was, I think, match day 2 or 3 of the tournament. So tournament was just starting to get underway. And Argentina were up 1-0 at halftime. And they lost that game 2-1. At that point, things felt like they changed. Because Argentina basically went from, we're playing Saudi Arabia in the first game. We don't really need to focus on this. We got other games in this group. And that mindset changed very quickly to, we basically have to win out here. And of course, that's what they did, even though there were draws mixed in there, some that went to penalty shootouts. But they locked down and obviously went on that run to the World Cup final, winning the tournament. I don't see that happening again this year. It feels like this is going to be very different. We know this is Messi's last World Cup, most likely. We all thought it was in 22, and obviously here we are 4 years later, and he's still on the team. I don't necessarily think Argentina need to get off to a fast start here. Obviously, with this group isn't phenomenal, to say the least. Like, you will still have 2 group games if you drop points here. I think they'll be fine. But if you don't show up against Algeria, I feel like a lot more questions start to be asked about this team. Now, this is still a quite good team on paper. You are still having Emi Martinez starting that. You are still having Christian Romero on that back line. Alexis McAllister is still in that midfield. Of course, Messi still on that field on the right wing. You look at Rodrigo de Paul. He's still there. You look at some of the other names. You got Nico Paz, who would potentially be coming off the bench here. This Argentinian team is very good. And they should be quite easily probably pushing over Algeria. But with the way this World Cup is played out, I feel like I can't really say that. Because I expected, obviously, Spain to push over Cabo Verde. 0-0 draw. Obviously, Germany just blew over Curacao. Haiti, I expect, even though they were playing Scotland, I expected that game to be a little bit more lopsided than it ended up being. It feels like this is not going to be a World Cup of blowouts. And honestly, that's probably good. The better games we have, the closer games we have, the better it is for the sport. And although Argentina, I think, win this game comfortably, again, would not shock me if this game is a little bit closer than what the experts want you to think. But Argentina still have the best team on this field, and I don't see that changing. So I say not changing because Lionel Scaloni, yes, he is technically the manager, but this is Messi's team. If we're completely honest with ourselves, this is Messi's team. I wouldn't expect anything less. I obviously they're running with Scaloni again after the 22 World Cup, and that worked fine. So I'm expecting more of the same here. I think Argentina start off, I won't say quite easily, but they will be fine. Argentina win this game. We move on to our last game of the day. It is a midnight Eastern kickoff, another late game, as Austria take part in their first World Cup game in 28 years as they face off against Jordan, who are in their first World Cup game ever. Now, we have seen the opposite ends of the spectrum for our debutants so far. We saw Curacao get a goal. They were level with Germany for about 15 minutes, and then it all went south. And then we see Cabo Verde pull off a 0-0 draw, and that is maybe the biggest result in Cabo Verde's history. How will it play out for Jordan? Obviously, that is a massive question. We will get answered at some point tomorrow, but more realistically the day after, given the time this game kicks off. But this Austrian team is not a team to be pushing over. These Austrians, managed by Ralf Rangnick, the former Man United interim manager at one point in history. That is just wild to think about. That was only a few years ago. They enter the World Cup for the first time in 28 years. Last time they were here was 98. They have a good team, not a great team. I look at Marcel Sabitzer is probably your biggest player on this team. Goalkeeper, Alexander Schlagel, he's going to have to play a massive role in this World Cup. And Marko Anurovic, the striker, also. All three of those are going to have to play massive roles in this World Cup if Austria want to go anywhere in this tournament. And, getting to a World Cup is hard enough. Getting results at the World Cup is a whole different spectrum. Now, for Austria, I think it's helpful for them that their first game back in 28 years is against a team that has never been here. A team that kind of just feels like they're happy to be here. That's what Jordan is at this point. It feels like they are just, wow, we made it to a World Cup. Maybe we can score a few goals, maybe get a point, but let's just celebrate getting there. That's kind of what it feels like for the Jordan team, and I may be completely reading that wrong. Obviously, everybody's going to say, oh, we came to win, obviously, but you can't always win. It feels like for Austria, this is the best setup for them to do something decent in this tournament, is getting those early jitters out early, especially against a team that has never been on this stage before. It might be shell-shocked themselves. Now, saying that, it does feel like those lower-sided squads in UEFA struggled. I look at your Swedens, your Turkeys, your Scotlands. I know they won, but they still struggled. Even Spain struggled. It's going to be an interesting dynamic to see how this team plays out, because this also feels like a way that if Jordan somehow gets a goal in this game and goes up, I don't know if they'll be relinquishing that. And by relinquishing it, I mean they'll either win or draw. This game confuses me. The time kickoff confuses me even more. This is a mind-boggler. I'm still going to take Austria here to win. I keep taking teams because they have the better talent on the field. That never seems to prove outright. I'm still rolling it with it, though. Give me Austria to win this game. So that's going to wrap it up for this Day 6 preview of the World Cup. A lot of action still ahead of us. Tomorrow is our final day of Matchday 1 action at the World Cup as Groups K and L finally take the stage. And of course, one of those teams is England. And the other ones are, of course, Portugal. They are mixed in there too. Cristiano Ronaldo makes his 6th World Cup appearance. So make sure you click like. Make sure you click subscribe. Tell anybody you know about the Nick Bird Sports Network, because we are still here. We are still rolling. We are going all the way to the final and then even past the final. So make sure you lock in. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you again soon for another episode of World Cup Preview, and of course, World Cup Review comes after all the games here on the Nick Burt Sports Network.